Hey, good morning, everybody. My name's Susan. I'm part of the Orion team. Thanks for streaming with us today. Hoping you're up north overlooking some beautiful water or on your boat, maybe just listening. We're just really glad that you're here today. We have Drew Daniels in the house for our last week of Welcome to the Neighborhood. And in a couple weeks, we have a great opportunity for your family to connect with some other families. We're going to have a K-Kids event at Bear Creek Park, which is on Snell Road, 2 weeks on a Sunday, where we're going to barbecue and just hang out, play some games, get to meet one another. We would love for you to come to that. Next weekend, we have our groups fair here. It's a great opportunity to connect with some people you may want to meet and join a small group because we have so many of them. You guys just sit back and relax. It's going to be a really great message, and we're just so happy that you're joining us. Take care.
Good morning and welcome to Kensington. We are so glad that you have joined us today. My name is Shauna and I'm one of the teaching pastors on staff. It's kind of a bittersweet day. Tomorrow a lot of you have work off, but it also means it's the end of summer. But that also means things are revving up around Kensington. First is our Student Ministries Kickoff. Every fall, we relaunch Breakaway for our middle school students in grades 6 through 8, and Edge for our high school students. Now, many of us, we've experienced an exceptionally difficult year, and so have our students. Many of us have traveled or been in transition this summer. So, this fall's kickoff is an especially important time for our students to come together again, to reconnect and to get back into the rhythm that includes intentional time for the growth of their faith and friendships. And if you're new to our community, please join us. All of our campuses will be holding fun kickoff events and parties the week of September 12th. You can find out more information by going to kensingtonchurch.org/breakaway for middle school students or kensingtonchurch.org/edge for high school. Now, I don't know about you, but I do love having something on the calendar to look forward to. And so do my boys. So pencil this in. Students in grades 6 through 12 are also invited to our annual Wild Retreat, happening in October. It's happening at one of our favorite places, Spring Hill Camps. This retreat is filled with wild activities, parties, and friendships. But most importantly, when they encounter Jesus, their lives become wild, like nothing they could imagine. Now, you can find out more information about this awesome weekend and even an early bird discount available at kensingtonchurch.org/wild. Before we tune into our last week of Welcome to the Neighborhood and the practical ways we can be intentional with our real life neighbors, let me just give you a heads up about our next series and invite you back next weekend. The title is I Feel Blank. Just fill in the blank. Do you feel joyful, worried, angry, sad, invisible? This past year and a half has given us quite the range and depth of our emotions. And God has given each of us the capacity to feel deeply. Our emotions are a gift. None of us would want to go through life without happiness or even sadness. At times, our emotions can leave us feeling lost and unsure as how to navigate them. And if we allow our emotional state to control our lives, they can be cruel dictators. But on the other hand, if we ignore our emotions, we end up living a hollowed out, almost robotic life. Now, David, he was a man who experienced many different emotions. And in this series, we'll look at some of his life experiences and the honest and vulnerable words he wrote to God about his feelings in the book of Psalms. And I'm sure you know some people who could really benefit from this series. So reach out to your friends, family, coworkers, and of course, your neighbors, and invite them to join you. Again, we are so glad you've decided to join us today.
Good morning, guys. My name's Ella. Welcome to Kensington. If you would stand and worship with us. You have a way of taking disappointment, making it an anthem of hope. You have a way of opening the promise, even when the door is still closed. It's what you do, it's who you are. You are like a wildfire in the dark. It's how
is in his blood. Jesus, light of heaven, friend forever, his kingdom come.
Hey, good morning, everybody. You can grab a seat. That was great. Thanks, you guys. Look at the energy they're bringing us today. Are you guys ready? I'm ready. I'm here. I'm not on a boat or up north, and neither are you. So I'm thinking it's in our future, right? Could be, maybe. Some guy's selling a pontoon boat. He was just telling me about it. I'm going to call him. I'll invite you all on, too. Totally. Can't wait. All right, so glad to see you all today. My name is Susan. I'm part of the Orion team, and I'm really glad that you're here with us. We've got a great message coming up with Drew Daniels is in the house today to finish up. I know he's a pretty outstanding guy. He's going to finish up our last weekend to welcome to the neighborhood, but first I have a few things I want to run past you, all right? Wanted to give you the results to our annual vote, which everything passed with some pretty good numbers, like 95 and 98%, or 99, even better. There you go. Elders affirmed, budget affirmed, and then can you go to the next slide real quick? Or the one before this, Alicia, come on now. She's not going to. Oh, you're funny. I was going to pretend like I was going to read that all to them. Never mind, the joke's over now. All right, if you ever want to know more about our budget, ever, reach out to any one of us or go online. Everything is available for your review. Please don't hesitate to ask about that. All right? Now, on a quick lighter note, and my favorite note, our K-Kids team would love some volunteers this season. Last Sunday, we maxed out. We had more kids come back than we ever expected. We had so many kids come back that a lot of staff got pulled back, which is fantastic. I love the 2-year-olds. Actually, just spent the last hour with them. But here's what I want to ask you. If you have love in your heart, you do not have to have a theology degree. You just have to be a kind person who loves kids. Please consider volunteering back there. I'll be out at the hub desk after this. You can give me your name, and you can just inquire. It doesn't mean you're signing up. It just means you can find out what we're looking for. Leading a small group of our future generation is probably the most important thing you could step into around here, and we would love for you to consider that. So please, please think about it, all right? And just ask me if you have questions. We'd love for you to just consider it. Lastly, Getaway. Who knows about Getaway, formerly known as Smash, a big women's event? You gonna come? You look like you might. Good, you're signed up. All right, you're registered? All right. Getaway, you guys, one day down in Detroit at Durfee Innovation Society. We're going to have the best time this year. So if you haven't yet registered, you got a chance to do so. It's the September 18th. We'd love to see you down there. And lastly, I'm going to go ahead and invite my friend Drew Daniels up here. What are you having? Are you barbecuing? Who's barbecuing ribs? Anybody? Ribs? Whose house am I going to? Is it got steaks? Salmon. Shrimp
Steaks,
kebabs.
I know.
Wow. I think they just don't want me to come because there was
Same,
nothing.
I'm feeling rejected.
Hot dogs? Look at
Thank you.
They're not eating.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go now.
Yeah.
Love you guys. Thanks
Thank
for being
you.
here.
Oh my gosh. Can we give it up for Susan and the amazing leadership we have here between Craig and Susan? We're so unbelievably blessed. Well, hey, hello. My name is Drew Daniels. So glad to be with you, and those joining us on the stream, hello, from your couch or your cottage. You should have taken us with you, but so glad you are here today. I help lead and serve with our 18 through 29 ministry, ages 18 through 29, cleverly titled 1829 as the ministry itself. And I'd be remiss if I'm not up here plugging our own ministry. So our ministry is a group of young adults that meet every single Tuesday night at our Troy location. So we have a service, worship, teaching. This Tuesday, we're starting our small groups for the whole year. So if you're like a young adult and you're living in a post-pandemic world, you're looking to meet some people, this week, Tuesday, and this month is perfect. We're forming all of our groups. And guess what? This Tuesday night, free Chick-fil-A after service. You're welcome. I know, God's chicken. Hey. So you have to be there and say hello to me there, because I'm looking for friends, so I don't want to be alone. But that's happening this Tuesday. But we are in our third week of a collection of talks called Welcome to the Neighborhood. If you were here last week, Craig McGlasson, he talked about turning our offenses into a table. cleverly had a fence on stage, putting angry faces of the people we were offended by, and then turned that bad boy into a table. And we're supposed to invite the people who maybe have given us offense and turn it into a time of connection with each other. And so this week, we're talking a little bit more about the notion of what the Bible and of what Jesus has to say about our activity and our means of worship. So in order to kind of set the proverbial table, I have a question to ask you, a question that may be a little bit provocative. What if I told you that Jesus does not care if you believe that you should love your neighbor or not? What if I told you that the Bible doesn't care whether you feel convicted to love your neighbor or not? You'd be like, Drew, hold on. The whole church is built around the idea that we love our neighbor. I mean, this is in our mission statement. We do all these series, and we're doing a 3-week series right now. I mean, you know, even if you're maybe disconnected from faith, you're saying, well, hold on. I know that Jesus even has something to say about love your neighbor as yourself. Like, it's pretty obvious. So here's the answer. The Bible and Jesus doesn't necessarily care whether you believe you should love your neighbor or not, or even if you feel convicted to love your neighbor or not. It's really concerned with whether you actually do it. I think when it comes to our faith or in our faith journey, we undervalue, we underestimate the amount of biblical real estate that is devoted to taking action as a form of worship. What do I mean? I think when we think of worship, maybe in this room, we think of a cold auditorium with delicious bagels. We think of a tissue box and a prayer room. Maybe when we think of worshiping God, it's all about what we know, and we gather information, we gather our intellect. It's about, and this was me, maybe my whole life, was trying to perfectly demarcate truth from error, about how God wants me to think about him, and how what's truth and factual, and how God works, how he represents himself on the earth, and what to believe and how to believe it. This is how we think about God, and this is not our form of worship. At least this is what we do when we come together, is we talk about God, and then we go to smaller groups and we think and talk about God, about how he works. But what if I told you that the Bible and Jesus himself, the first century notion of worship, had a lot more to do with what you do, had a lot more to do with how you serve, how you implement into the world. And in fact, today we're gonna look at a passage that has a stinging kind of truth to it about how what we say and what we think and what we feel many times is not as important as the evidence of our actions. That it's actually our actions that prove that what we think and feel is truly the Lord and the seat of our hearts. In fact, I actually have been learning recently about the value of words and the difference between words and actions. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the same guy who wrote the book, The 5 Love Languages, wrote another book called The 5 Apology Languages. Did anybody know this in here? Has anybody ever heard of an apology language? Party of one. Awesome. So I didn't know this. And my wife and I, we've been married 5 years. We have a beautiful, angelic cherub of a baby, 16 months. He doesn't cry. It's crazy. Kidding. But we've learned about these apology languages when we were doing our premarital 5 years ago. And the first 2 apology languages are more of mine. So here's what they are. I have to look at them. It's called, the first one is expressing regret. That's the first apology language, where you use the words, I'm sorry. Many of us think this is like every apology, but it's really just the first one. I'm expressing remorse. I'm naming what is wrong. I'm grieved in my heart. So for example, usually with my wife, it's like, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm grieving the fact that I waited until the last minute to tell you that I'm going golfing with the boys tomorrow. And then my second apology language that's kind of combined is called accepting responsibility. Accepting responsibility. So in this one, you take full ownership for the actions and you talk about how they have caused harm. So for me, it's like, honey, I'm sorry that I have banished you to the home with our 16-month-old for 6 hours while I do a very expensive hobby. I'm realizing that the foolishness of my actions have driven a wedge between us and our marriage. We've allowed Satan to have a foothold because of what I've done. See, I take full ownership. Like for me, this is my apology language. I will print out a document, I will sign it and frame it on the wall, telling you all the ways I'm wrong. But when I go to my wife and I declare these things, she just goes, okay. I mean, it's really nice that you would say that. It's really nice that you would feel that. But I don't really know that you're sorry. And I learned that her apology language is called genuine repentance. See, her way of apology is I want to see a plan of action to let me know that this will never happen again. I need to see a date on the calendar. I need a strategy. So she's often like, I just need to know that there's something in your character that we need to pray over, that this shall never happen again, where I will be banished to the house because Saturdays are for the boys. I don't care. What I've learned is that oftentimes it's our actions that are the true evidence of our words. That in fact, I'm actually learning a lot about when my wife, she would begin to ask me, she'd say, Drew, I want you to say, I promise. Anybody in here maybe have a spouse, a husband, wife, or children or whatever, where it's like you just want them to say, I promise I'm gonna do this. So like whether it's a conflict, like promise me that you are gonna look into say, tell me that you're gonna promise you're gonna look out for this in the future. And for me, your boy, he's clever. I don't know if maybe some of you are like this. I'm like, hey, I don't wanna promise nothing. Here's why. I don't wanna overpromise and underdeliver. So what I'm gonna do is I'm only gonna deliver. You can call me Amazon Prime. And she goes, Drew, I disagree with you. And this is where my wife took me to school. She says, Drew, I disagree with you. When somebody is willing to say, I promise, it tells me and anyone around them, they have full confidence of knowing that they are going to do what they say they're going to do, right? If you are trying to reassure me, you say, I promise, I'm not going to let this escape. I have every intention. My will is for this. So saying I promise is the only guarantee I have of you doing it. If you fail to say I promise, you're failing to even show up and meet me. There's this famous internet trend where a bunch of heartbroken and angry young adult women are posting these videos online, because maybe they have a bad relationships experience. And they just repeat one singular phrase over and over and over again as the joke. And the phrase they repeat is, because if he wanted to, he would. And if he wanted to, he would. But if he really wanted to, he would. So what's the message? Well, if he wanted to spend time with you, he would. If he wanted to text you, he would. If he wanted to reassure you that you are loved and he has eyes for nobody else, honey, he would. All the ladies are like, the kid's got a point. Because if he wanted to, he would. And if he wanted to, then he would. See, there's something that all of us intrinsically know. The difference between what we say, think, or feel is different from the evidence of our actions. See, the actions is the only thing that we can form an identity around. Our actions are the only thing we can form. In fact, there's this thing in our culture called Post-Modernism. The idea of Post-Modernism is that everyone has their own individual ideas of what truth is. And so it's kind of like, hey, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. You do what's best for you, I'll do what's best for me. And the idea is that now there's no truth. But what happens is people begin to form groups around different ideas of truth, whether it's politics, religious denominations, social belonging, that kind of thing. And people form truth around their social groups. And in the process, what begins to happen? People offer lip service to what they believe is true. But the problem is, do all of us and what we say actually align with our actions? And we'll come back to this. In fact, in the Bible, Jesus has a stinging rebuke against lip service. He says this. He says, many of you will come to me on the day of judgment and say, Lord, Lord. But your heart, but I will say, I never knew you. I never had friendship with you. I never had a relationship. He says, you present like you're a whitewashed tomb. You're beautiful on the outside, but on a tomb, on the inside, you're dead. In fact, he says to his critics, the Pharisees, the religious elite, maybe some of us types of Christians in the room, he'd say, you honor me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me. See, the idea is that Jesus, he understands that many times our words are just used as a presentation to protect ourselves, to protect our belonging, to make sure that people aren't going to accuse us or think that we're terrible people. But at the end of the day, it's just a presentation of words. But the real evidence that our words have meaning is by how we live our life. Like, don't be doers of the word, be hearers of the word. Don't be hearers of the word, be doers of the word. Like this is littered throughout biblical, the pages of the Bible. And so when it comes to the Bible, what if I told you that it's the actions that many times people could point out and say, there's a Jesus follower, there's a believer. In fact, what Christians called themselves in the ancient world in the first century, they called themselves followers of the way, right? Jesus saying, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. But in many other ways, this can kind of be related to the way to live, the way to serve, the way to forgive somebody else, the way to interact with your neighbor. And Jesus tells all these stories about doing things, not just saying them or what to believe or how to think or the sensations we feel. He says, no, when you give an action, something you participate in, when you give, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. When you fast, this action of worship, don't disfigure your faces. You're doing it to break the bonds of injustice, right? When you give to the widow, to the orphan. When you forgive your brother, leave your sacrifice on the altar and go make amends. All these things are actions that we do to love our neighbor. And once you begin to see it, you can't unsee it. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it. In fact, there's a story that I heard. I don't know its origins, but it's a parallel to maybe even a story we've all heard Jesus give. The story goes like this. There's a man whose car breaks down on the side of the road. And he walks a few blocks, and he comes up to the first home, and he knocks on the door, and there's a Christian. And they open the door, and the Christian's like, oh my gosh, like, is everything okay? He goes, no, my car broke down. I don't have any help. He goes, oh man, I don't have any way to help you fix this. Man, are you doing okay? You know, how's everything in your life? And he goes, not great at the moment. And he goes, hey, can I pray for you? Just like, I like to pray for, yeah, sure, absolutely. And the Christian prays for him, and Lord of the Seven Sabbaths, gets really into the weeds of God and the things of God. And after the prayer, the guy gets along his way, and the Christian shuts the door, and he just goes, man, God, see, that's why you made that guy on the side of the road car fall apart, so that I could pray with them and you could be seen. And in another story, the same guy in a car breaks down, and he walks a few blocks, and there lives an atheist. And the atheist opens the door, and he goes, oh my gosh, my car broke down, I need help. And he goes, oh, I have no way of helping you, but I guess we have to figure this thing out, don't we? And helps him fix the car and goes on his way. This kind of reminds me of like that parable that Jesus tells, right? The Good Samaritan, where there was a person who was beaten and left for dead on the road, and the pastor, the Bible study leader, and the church attendant were driving to Kensington, and so they'd walk by the person in need. And the person who was non-religious or ungodly was there to nurse the person back to health. It's almost as if this is the heart of God that he's trying to communicate. What if we were so distracted by trying to perfectly demarcate truth from error? What if we were so distracted by how to think about God? And if you don't think about God, then you can't belong with us. If you don't think about him in this way, you don't belong here. Or you don't feel these sensations, man, I'm gonna make a judgment about your relationship with God, and I'm gonna think of you as less holy. Whoa. What if there are people who are atheists who are better worshipers of God than maybe many of us, including myself in this room? And there's this passage that Jesus, when he starts his earthly ministry, and he's giving all these blessings and the Beatitudes, he starts to say, blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the kingdom of God, and blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they shall see God. He's saying all these blessings in Matthew's account. And the first teaching he does in his most famous sermon talks about how his believers and followers should act and behave and be and represent in the world. And he uses the comparison of salt and cities. Salt, cities, and the light of cities. And really the two meanings he's trying to parallel are, number one, to add unto people's lives, to enhance people's lives. And the second one is to attract people. So the two meanings again, to add and then to attract others. And this is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. He says, you are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. So in Jesus' first teaching on salt, Bible scholars have figured out that in the ancient world, salt had roughly 11 different uses, whether it's to enhance flavor on meat, to preserve things. Sometimes it was a fertilizer to help things grow. Salt had a lot of utility. In fact, some Roman soldiers actually were getting paid in salt because of its value and its ability to be used. And so what's the parallel that Jesus is making? If you want to be a follower of me, if you want to move this kingdom forward, you need to have utility, you need to have use, purpose, you need to do and be someone who enhances and adds value to the lives of others. My siblings and I always made fun of our dad because when we get to restaurants, he'd always salt like all of his food. Like I swear, he'd salt salads. And when he'd salt, this is how he would do it. He'd take the salt shaker, he'd bring it all the way up to the ozone layer, and he would salt all the way up here. The man salted the table. I'm not kidding. And we'd be like, Dad, like why are you salting all the way from here? And he goes, Drew, your old man's a genius. And he was like, see, if you salt all the way down here, it's gonna clump up. It's not gonna taste good. But if you salt all the way up here, even distribution. I never forgot that. I salt all my food in the ozone layer now. See, I think when it comes to our saltiness, I think the more we go vertical and pursue to be like Jesus, to pursue the things of God, we will naturally be distributed to enhance the lives of other people. Because the worst thing in the world is when a bunch of Jesus followers get really clumped together. You know what I'm saying? The worst thing in the world is when a bunch of Jesus followers are clumped together and they lose their utility. And we begin to get infighting about what you believe, how you think things should go, what our preferences are, when the whole point of salt is to enhance the lives of others. And as the kids would say, we don't want to be salty. We don't want to be too salty. We want to have the even distribution. And so Jesus, in his second teaching about cities, he says, you're a city on a hill. You don't put a lamp under a bowl, you elevate it. I went to the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky. Anybody ever been to Mammoth Caves before? It's a beautiful cave system, and some of the rooms are really well lit, but for a majority of this tour, you have to take a lantern with you. And what was frustrating to me is as you're walking through these caves, our eyes are always drawn into light, and it's just kind of burning and blazing this open lantern. And because your eye is attracted to the light, all you see is darkness, right? You can't see any of the beauty of the caves. So what do we do with all lives? We put them on top because they illuminate the world. They illuminate our surrounding. I'm gonna butcher this quote because I'm thinking of it on the spot, but I love C.S. Lewis, and he says, I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun is risen, not because I see the sun rise, but because of the sun rising, I see everything else. See, the idea of light is that it sheds light. So we as Jesus followers, and the way that we conduct ourselves, and the way that we love our neighbors, and the way that we do healing work in our own lives, now all of a sudden the rest of the world seems to make sense. Like, man, we are here to be loved, to be known, to be seen. That's what light does. Everything else makes sense in light of having it in the room. Did you know that in Jesus' day, cities were often built on hills? They were often elevated. And at night, when they'd light them up with torches, travelers and traders could see it from miles off and be drawn into it to know where it was. See, I'll give you one more. In the Greek, when it says a city set on a hill, the word set in the Greek actually means strategically placed in elevated ways. What if God wanted to elevate your life on purpose, to strategically place you on purpose? That as we follow Jesus, you are meant to have an elevated life so that you can help illuminate people's world so that they can see the world in all of its beauty instead of just seeing darkness. See, light always invades and transforms darkness. In the same way, Jesus is saying, if you want to follow me, this is the true manifestation of doing it. Now, I have to admit, I have a confession to make. On my neighborhood, we've had 3 families either make or bake something for me and my wife, and we haven't done anything in return. And I almost feel like God's kind of looking at me saying, Drew, who's the real neighbor? Because again, I can say all day, I can believe that I should love my neighbor. I can be convicted, I can have the sensation. But the only evidence to say, man, do I really believe God and Jesus' invitation and challenge is through my actions. Do you add value unto your neighbors? Do you attract your neighbors? See, what I think happens, even inside of the church, I think the problem is we want people to know Jesus so bad we give a fantastic lip service for what it's like to be a Jesus follower. Hey, come to Kensington. You're gonna belong. We're gonna have coffee. We're gonna serve you. Everything's gonna be awesome and amazing all the time. Hey, come to church. Like, you're gonna belong. Your life's gonna be changed. You know that wound? Jesus is gonna meet it. He's gonna transform it. He'll never ask you to do anything hard. Like, no, you're gonna meet Jesus and he's gonna make your life easy and better. It's like Jesus like, I never said that. Jesus says, like, you're gonna be persecuted on my name. He says, like, if they persecuted me, they're gonna persecute you. He says, I told you this to take heart because there will be trouble in this life, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus is saying, no, like, being a follower of mine is difficult and there's a lot of struggle. But I think it's easy to offer lip service because this is what we want for people. Man, come find your belonging, come find home. And all it takes is one maybe wounded or hurt person who's trying their best to follow Jesus to have us have a communal fallout being like, man, that didn't represent God. I don't know if I can belong here. It's, oh man, I just don't feel like they really get the whole God thing at that church. I don't really know if they really are getting into it the way that I want to, so I have to, like all of a sudden, when things don't meet up to what our ideal hope for the church is, we can become cynical and jaded. And it's because we in church and Jesus followers are advertising and giving this amazing lip service for what it's all gonna be like for everybody. And then the moment one thing goes wrong, all of a sudden we're jaded. See, this is the difference between our words and our thoughts and our feelings versus our actions, that I feel like this is actually the whole idea of setting high expectations for what church should be like is one of the primary reasons why I think my generation or all of our generations are kind of leaving the church, is because it didn't match what they saw and what they maybe hear Jesus teach. It's because maybe if we spent just as much time understanding that our actions were worship, maybe people would see it. And if you don't believe me, let's read the words of Jesus himself. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I mean, he says it right here. This is Jesus in verse 16. He says, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Now, there's two things to notice here. They will see your good deeds. What's so important about seeing good deeds? Because people can't see what you think. People can't see what you feel. People can't see what your experience or personal relationship with God is. They only see it because you've taken action on it. See what I'm saying? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And then what did he say? It's your good deeds. Now, we are not a works-based church here at Kensington. We believe that it's by God's grace that saves us, that we can't do enough good works. In fact, God did the good work by sending Jesus, and by placing our faith and submitting to the lordship of Jesus, God will look at us and say, you are perfect, blameless, and righteous. But what he is saying is, the evidence of your faith is these good deeds. And people will make a verdict about who God is based on your actions, not by our lip service, not by what we think, nor by what we experience with God. Is it important to have experiences, feelings, and thoughts? Is it important to have all that intact? Absolutely. In fact, that can lead to some of the best actions of loving others. But if all we have is our thoughts and our feelings, then we're missing the whole crux of the gospel. The gospel is Jesus summarizing it in the two laws, saying to love God and to love others. Because the participation of the rich part of life is in sharing what we have with other people. I love this phrase that you're only as rich as your relationships. You can try to attain success and be completely alone. So the idea that when we have the love of Jesus and we're able to share it with others and it transforms our light, we bring our light and we make a copy of it, all of a sudden their life becomes transformed. But if all we did was stay with each other and fight about what we believed or how we felt or what it should look like, then this person will never, ever be able to be infected with the love of Jesus the way that we were and to have a relationship with God. There's a total difference for all of us, myself included in this room. The difference between what we say, what we think, what we believe, and then how that actually turns out in actions. In fact, if you want to have a slide point, it's our actions that add and attract. Because people can see our actions. They can't see our thoughts and our feelings. So I want to give you an example about this because I want to drive this home. I want to make sure that there's no doubt that this is what you need to do. But before I give you this illustration, I want to pause for a moment to receive our offering and continue this time of worship as a different form. If you have never been to Kensington, we just want to say welcome. This moment is not designed for you. We welcome anyone who calls Kensington home to participate in helping grow God's kingdom and reach more people. As that's really our heart, is to not even just collect, but even to give this away. So there's a few ways you can give. You can text the word Kensington to the number 77977. It'll spit a web link back at you, and you click the link and follow the prompts. Or you can give on our app. Likewise, we have buckets. Due to the COVID season, you can drop money or a check in there. And we're extremely grateful for your generosity and just want to say thank you for participating in worship. But I'd also be remiss to not offer an actionable form of worship along in this moment, which is to repeat what Susan said, the fact that our K-Kids ministry right now is in a place where we're having to turn families away because of the volume of children. Maybe you want to make a difference in the next generation of faith and serve. Maybe your heart beats when you think about children, in your life, and you don't want to just think about it or feel it anymore. You want to actually participate in the transforming of the life and experience that richness. So that's happening, and you can go talk to somebody in the hub in the back, or you can talk to one of our K-Kids people behind the desk out in the lobby. So here's my illustration to kind of give you a glimpse into why our actions matter and why people will create a verdict about God based on our actions. I want us to think for a moment just about a court of law. A court of law. How does a court of law determine a verdict of guilt or innocence, right? By evidence, right? So by irrefutable evidence. Who in here has ever seen Making a Murderer on Netflix? Making a Murderer? Okay, select few, or the Serial podcast. Okay, if you've ever been engaged, or maybe you're just kind of like, this is a guilty pleasure, but I got to see if anyone else is going to raise their hand before I do. If you are familiar with any of this at all, or maybe you love lawyer shows, you know the nature of evidence. And here's what evidence is, right? It's the glove fits. It's, the cell phone tower pinged in a different location, than where they said they were. They must have done it because they were over there. Oh, they texted this friend. We have it hardwired into a network of phones. Oh, man, they couldn't have been there. The street traffic camera. Irrefutable evidence that you cannot overcome. This is the way that we can proclaim a verdict of guilt or innocence. So you want to know what doesn't work in a court of law? But Your Honor, I love her. I would never do that to her. Because what is Your Honor going to say? You can say, you can think, you can feel whatever you want, but that does not tell me whether you did or did not do it. Your lip service means nothing here. But Your Honor, I feel this way, and I think about it all the time. Where's the evidence? In fact, I think this is true when it comes to so many of the causes that are popping up all over. There's so many things to get involved with. And because of these social groups that we want to belong, sometimes we'll, for example, align in a cause and just go, yeah, I believe this is the right way to go about this. But in the process, none of our life actually reorients, and we don't take any actionable change, but we've just given lip service. The only way that we can actually declare a verdict on our own life is by what we do, not by what we say or what we feel or what we think is the right way. In fact, James Clear, he's an author of a book called Atomic Habits. And he talks about the most powerful way to create change in your life is through believing that you are somebody in your identity. Like setting goals, temporary. You hit a goal, you run out of motivation. Set up a system in your life, still not as powerful, but it's identity change. And he suggests the way to create identity change, identity meaning the self-judgments, the self-view we have about ourselves. Am I the type of person, right, who works out every day? Am I the type of person who loves my family well? The only way you can believe who you are in your identity and that to change is by having habits and compiling evidence in your own life that you can literally point to and say, I know for a fact that I'm the type of person who holds space for somebody else and give them empathy because I have this conversation and I sent this text. I know I'm the type of person who doesn't judge because when they had a different view of me, I didn't speak up. I didn't Bible thump them in this conversation. I can confidently declare a verdict over myself because of the actions I have taken, not because of what I think or feel, but because I can point to pieces of evidence that tell me otherwise. So when it comes to being Jesus followers, how do we know if we're salty? How do we know if we are light? Where's our evidence? Maybe for us, we need to start compiling it. We need to drive our neighbor's kids to soccer practice to point to it. Maybe we need to drive our neighbor to the airport. Maybe we need to step into work conversations, and instead of butting heads, hold space and just listen first before we respond. Maybe we need to compile evidence and have a dinner conversation with somebody who has a completely jaded and hated view towards the church and religion, and you hold space for them, and you can compile evidence that you are in fact somebody who cares regardless of what someone else believes, that you're gonna be there to listen no matter what. How can you start compiling evidence so you can declare a verdict of somebody to say, no, it's not just what I think, it's not just what I feel. I know that I can say this. I know that I am following Jesus truthfully, because it's easy to know what we want with our lips or even with our feelings. I was really convicted by this quote by a famous speaker, author Francis Chan, and he's talking about discipleship. And as he's talking about discipleship, he's like, discipleship is where you reproduce your own faith onto somebody else's. You teach them how Jesus lived, how he acted, how to forgive, how to have a relationship with God, and then you reproduce that onto somebody else. And so he has this very challenging quote. And because we're talking about light and being light of the world that transforms darkness, I figure this is an appropriate illustration. He says, when it comes to your life, and it comes to your witness and you wanting to reproduce yourself, does God want to make two of you? Now, when I interpret this quote, I don't think it's necessarily meaning to say we should feel shame or unworthiness because, we don't obey God or we don't have the amount of prayer time that we ought to have. But rather it's, can the deeds that we do before people, can people point to them? Like when we encounter our neighbors or our people, our coworkers, the people who are really in our lives, is our love going to be reproduced? The way that we love and hold space and show compassion and remove judgment and give generously will be reproduced. And what a joy that would be is if God decided to make two of you. It reminds me of a song we're about to sing, and I just wanted to wash over us in this room. It's called Pictures of Mountains, and the idea is that nobody ever had their heart beat and pound out of their chest because they were looking at pictures of mountains. No, they're transformed because they're in the mountains. And I think in the same way, nobody's life ever got transformed because we believed we should love them. People's lives get transformed because we engaged into the mess of somebody else. So will you engage in the messiness of others?
I sit in my car outside restaurants and bars, reading about what's inside. I look up opinions about news and religion, so I don't have to use my own mind. I should call my friends, but I read their posts instead. Like dancing a waltz with no partner, nobody's holding your hand. Like singing duets as a solo, the harmony's just in your head. It's almost as if I have been everywhere, almost tasted the food, almost breathed in the air, but nobody's heart ever pounded from that feeling of being surrounded by pictures of mountains. People are messy and life can get heavy. It's easier to keep it online, like checking the weather to see if it's better instead of just going outside. Pretend I'm unaware, but the truth is that I'm scared. Like dancing a waltz with no partner, nobody's holding your hand. Like singing duets as a solo, the harmony's just in your head. It's almost as if I have been everywhere, almost tasted the food, almost breathed in the air, but nobody's heart ever pounded from that feeling of being surrounded by pictures of mountains. Everyone's right here on my phone, so why do I still feel so alone? A waltz with no partner, nobody's holding your hand. A duet's just a solo, if the harmony's all in your head. I thought that I knew what a mountain was like, till I stood in the valley and looked up at the sky, and I felt my heart beating faster. That feeling I'd been chasing after is something that no one can capture in pictures of mountains.
I think a lot about this idea of how we should approach living life with God, because we're here today, we're talking about, man, it's just what we do, not what we think or feel. I love this author named Skye Jethani, and he posed that there's kind of 4 different positions we can sit underneath God and experience relationship with him. And the first one, he says, man, sometimes we think of God as, we think of life under God is the first position, right? It's all about living in perfect submission and being obedient. And then he's like, there also is a position called life over God, where you're like, man, my life is over. I'm more important, or what I'm dealing with is more important. The other one, he says, it's a life for God. Oh, doing something for him, accomplishing so much for his kingdom, building, skyscrapers for him. And the last one is life from him, where it's all about what I get from God, the blessings that he instills and bestows on my life. And he suggests that there's actually a 5th and better posture of relationship. And he says it's life with God. It's not about getting an outcome. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present with him. And I've maybe have you even used this example before, but have you ever seen a movie where the opening scene is the same exact scene as the closing scene? Where like in the opening scene, the character is in this world and they're called into an adventure. There's this problem they have to solve. But in this opening scene, they're bored and they kind of hate their life and they're pursuing all these other things. And they go on this wild adventure, and then they have to access their vulnerability because they've destroyed relationships, and they finally do the one thing that they thought they never could do, and it solves the problem. And then finally they're back in the opening scene where they originally started, and this time with like a boyfriend or girlfriend. And the author, Skye Jethani, he says, this is the picture of the Bible, where the opening and the closing scene are the exact same. In the beginning scene, it's God walking in the cool of the day with Adam and Eve, next to them, present, side by side, enjoying the communion of their relationship. And by the end, it's God in Revelation saying, I will be your people, and I will be with them, and I will be their God, and I will wipe away every tear from their eye. It's like almost as if the whole purpose of man trying to pursue their own glory or establish their own kings or look for their own versions of saviors, only for God to access his own vulnerability and kill his one and only son on the cross. This is the story of God. And we end where we should have been the whole time, with him. And so as we proceed in this moment, we're gonna sing a song called Available, because I think it's tempting to maybe wanna look at our future and say, what can I do for you? Or God, I wanna be perfect underneath you. But what if we use this moment just to be with God, to be present of what we feel and what he's doing in our story? So if I can just invite all of you to stand with me, I'm gonna pray as we go into this song, Available. God, we thank you that you are with us, that you will never leave us nor forsake us, that in this journey of life, there's so much that ideas that are stirring or wonderings of, man, God, I need to do better, try harder, invite this person over, have them. God, we don't want this to be another thing we have to go do. We don't want to feel like we have to earn our love. God, we work from love. We work from knowing the comfort of your peace in relationship side by side with you. And so God, may it be from this place, as we go more and more vertical, more and more into relationship with you, we would be naturally dispersed and strategically placed to where you want us to be so that we can love other people with the gift of your love to pass along to others. God, we are here and we are available. In your name, amen. I always feel a weird nagging sense of guilt, because, you get up here and it's just like this intense message of saying, man, you gotta go do. But I just want us to all feel that sense of encouragement that I believe it's not so much about just like white knuckling it and doing more good things for God. It really does come from a source of knowing who we are in our identity, who God has called us to be. And it's in this place that once we surrender our own will and agenda to God, all of a sudden we are opened and available to be used by Him. And once we open our eyes to see, man, there's people around me where I've been strategically placed, all of a sudden you see things differently. And so I want to encourage you, it's not a do better, try harder. Instead, it's from a place of transformation that you can go and live and do. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming out. We're super excited about next week here at Kensington. We have some really fun stuff in our lobby. I heard there's like donut holes. There's opportunities to jump into groups here. As well, Student Ministries is kicking off next Sunday, next weekend. So if you have a teenager or middle school student, I promise they're gonna be doing some events and then services later this month. Maybe if you're a young adult, come hang out with me Tuesday night at our Troy location. But hey, maybe you feel like God is really stirring in your life and we don't wanna miss this moment for you to really engage with Him. So we have a prayer team that you can connect with in the back or even at our hub. They can help direct you to people who wanna have a conversation or even pray for some things that you feel like you need to pray over. Well, hey, thanks so much. We're gonna come back next week for a new series called I Feel, talking about the hang-ups in life. We are excited and we will see you there. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.